Hello, welcome back again. This is now chapter 6 of value-added tax, and this is some words on the tax base. So, the different subchapters where we have to talk about is the regular tax base. That means the consideration and later changes in the price, and a replacement or minimum tax base in cases where a regular tax base cannot be found or might be manipulated downwards by the taxpayer in a way which the law doesn't like. So let's begin at the beginning with the regular definition of the tax base. You can find that, oh my God, already the beginning is spoiled. Well, the regular tax base is to be found in paragraph 10.1 of the Umsatzsteuergesetz or in Article 73 of the VAT Directive of the EU if you look for the underlying source in EU law. Well, it says nothing else than you calculate the tax base beginning with the gross amount, and the gross amount is all what the supplier receives for the delivery or service minus, or from whoever it comes, from the customer or from a third person, or as a subsidy which is paid to make these transactions possible, so to fill up the price, and minus the amount of VAT included in the gross price. So that brings you to the net amount, and that is the tax base, plain and simple. So let's apply that formula. In case of a net amount of 100, the gross amount can just be calculated by adding the VAT rate on top, and that is how the law the reason why the law has chosen that approach, because if an entrepreneur calculates, then you end up with the price which you want to take, and then you just have to add the VAT on top, and then you have the real cost price for which you can sell. So if the net amount is 100, you add 19% on top and end up with 119% of the gross price. Of the net price as a gross amount. And in case of the reduced rate, you just start with 100 again, add the 7% and end up with 107% of the net price as gross amount. That leads to the following formula if the net amount is unknown and you know the gross amount. If the gross amount given is 100, that corresponds to 119% of the unknown net amount. So the net amount here will be gross amount divided by 119% or divided by 1.19, which is mathematically exactly the same. Or if the VAT rate which is applicable is only 7%, then the gross amount which you know corresponds to 107% of the unknown net amount. So you just divide the gross amount by 107% and, miracle, surprise, you arrive at the unknown net amount and get it. So that's how you deal with these problems. And in reality, these two ways to compute the net amount, or to find the gross amount with a known net amount, are of highest importance. You must be familiar with them and you must know when to apply which one. So let's look at an example. The first example I have here on the slide is buyer B pays 20,000 euro for a car to a trader. Now 20,000 is the amount which the buyer pays. So all what the car trader gets from the buyer is 20,000, so that is the gross amount. If the VAT rate is 19% for a car, and it is 19% for a car, then we know that 20,000 corresponds to 119% of the unknown net amount. So net amount, our tax base, is 100 out of 119 of 20,000, so 16,806 and 72 cents. Next example, consumer C buys a bar of chocolate and pays €1 for it. Now, the delivery from the trader to consumer C, that's the case which we have to check. And all what is paid is evidently €1. That's then the gross amount. The rate for chocolate is 7%, so that means that the €1 corresponds to 107% of the net amount. So we end up with 93 cents as a net amount. The buyer B2 buys a car and pays for it by 3 installments of 5,000, 4,000, and 4,000. Then all what the buyer pays is 5,000 plus 4,000 plus 4,000. So that should be 13,000. Okay, mathematics. Mathematics usually does not tolerate minority views, so I should change that later. Let's have a small break. And after that very small break, you see now that miraculously that 11,000 has been turned by heavenly forces into a 13,000, and this is now the correct total and is evidently the gross amount which our car trader gets. Now, if a car is taxed under the 19% rate, so this 13,000 must be equivalent to 119% of the net amount. So we end up consequently by dividing that by 1.19. And so we end up with a net amount of 10,924.36 euro. By the way, what you can already see here is the formula in the law says all what the customer pays or all what the supplier gets, and there is no time limit. The formula does not say all what the supplier or seller gets now. It just says all what the supplier gets, and that means not now, but from now on till the end of eternity. So the total of everything which can be expected, that's the gross amount. Wholesaler W makes a price to retailer R. The good in question is to be sold for a price of 10,000 plus VAT. Now, evidently, everything which the retailer has to pay is 10,000 plus VAT, so 11,900. Now you can apply the usual formula. The gross amount, therefore, is 11,900, gross amount, not net amount, minus the VAT amount included, 19, so we end up with 10,000 net amount, something which one could have known from the beginning already. Yeah. Sometimes that is something which you see here from the last example. The contract between vendor and buyer does not name the gross price but the net price and states that VAT just comes on top. In that case, the price which has to be paid is under normal circumstances still the gross price. In that case now, naturally it is clear what the net price will be because you add the VAT to the net price in order to get the gross price and then you deduct it again. So it's clear that the net price will be the tax base. Such conditions are, at least in EU countries, only allowed in contracts between business persons because in contracts with a consumer, consumer protection laws require that the consumer gets named a clear and concrete price and not some formula, because by that a consumer might be confused, irritated, distracted, so that in the end consumer takes a wrong decision. So the contracts with the consumer must name and agree always a gross price. So if you ever are in a supermarket, you can be sure that what you see on the shelves will be a gross price if you are somewhere in Europe. not to state the final price, but to agree on the way how the price shall be computed, like 10,000 plus VAT, is only allowed in contracts between merchants and similar people whom the law considers to be so well informed and educated that they can deal with such a formula price and still have a clear idea on what they agree upon. Between merchant is such a behavior is even very usual, might be customary in the sector of economy where you are doing business, that they negotiate only over net prices because both sides are used to the VAT is only a temporary element of the price because the one has to pay it and the other gets it back from the fiscal office, so that for cost calculation and other things it does not really matter. So that's the reason why between merchants very often they just talk about net prices, because for them naming the VAT would probably make calculation more difficult, and so they prefer to agree on clear net prices. Now the problem naturally is if you read something in a case description or something like that, how can you find out if something is a gross price or a net price? And there are some clear things. If the contract names the price as net price plus VAT, then what the customer in the end really has to pay will nevertheless be the gross price, because you have to charge net price plus VAT in the invoice. So the payment in the end will be the gross price. So if merchant 1 and merchant 2, what they can under civil law agree on a net price condition, then the invoice nevertheless will require a payment of 11,900. So what is paid will be a gross price. There are deviations, exceptions from that very fundamental rule, which I show you now on the next slide. Let's have a look. There are some cases where under the VAT rules, not the entrepreneur, but the customer is the person who has to do the tax payment to the fiscal office, so who is the official taxpayer. And that means in these few cases, the situation is different, because if the customer has to pay the VAT amount to the fiscal office, then he or she is the taxpayer, and the entrepreneur will not receive the VAT together with the payment. Let's illustrate this a bit. The most well-known case is the reverse charge system, which sometimes applies to cross-border service transactions. Just to explain how it works, the standard situation is that the entrepreneur pays the tax to the fiscal authorities. So the customer hands over net price plus VAT to the vendor. So the entrepreneur gives the tax to the fiscal office, and so asks the customer to get net price plus VAT, because it's him or her who passes on that amount to the fiscal office, so he or she needs to get that tax amount from the customer too. In the exceptional constellation that the customer pays the tax to the fiscal office, the situation is completely different. Here we have the customer paying the tax to the fiscal office. And now when it comes to what do we give the entrepreneur, it makes evidently no sense to hand the tax amount a second time over to the entrepreneur. That would make no sense. We have given the tax already, the tax component to the fiscal office, so the only component of the price which is left over is the net price for the entrepreneur. In that case, so you know that the price agreed in a contract is the net price, because the tax comes on top and is paid separately to the fiscal office, and that everything which is paid to the entrepreneur must be a net amount. So here the contract price and the payment is a net amount. And this constellation appears in practice in the so-called reverse charge cases. In German law, that's paragraph 13b USTG in the VAT directive, It's approximately 194 and the fourth following articles of the directive. Then the same constellation can be found in the so-called inter-community acquisition of goods cases in German law, that special taxable event which is described in 1.1 number 5 USDG, and furthermore in the so-called triangulation cases which you find in German law in paragraph 25b USDG, and that is a constellation which, by the way, is relatively rare. So you need not know these things as a beginner. Only later in the course of the course you will have to deal with that. So this basic distinction is nevertheless something which you should keep in mind, because you could always, based on that model, that distinction between the two situations here, based on that you can always find out if amounts which are paid or amounts which are agreed upon in the contract are gross amounts or net amounts. In the cases on the right side, everything which is paid to the entrepreneur is automatically a net amount without that anyone has to say it in the contract or in a case data description. Good. So here, if you can foresee, it will be a case of 13b or 25b or of inter-community acquisition. You know that the amount which is paid from the customer to the entrepreneur is automatically net. In all other cases, the amount which is paid is automatically a gross price. Now let's look to details. What does it mean that all what the supplier gets is a part of the gross amount and that the VAT amount has to be deducted? What can happen with regard to the tax base? Well, discounts can be granted without any conditions. So you go to a wholesaler or as a retailer, and the official price of the goods which you buy there is 100,000, but the retailer says the wholesaler says you are a good friend and blah blah blah, all these things which one says, and then he gets a discount of 10%. Now the consequence of that is all what the customer pays here for the goods is only 90,000. That officially one speaks of 100,000, and then a deduction of that is just brainwashing psychology. And so what the law looks on is what is really paid, and from the conditions here it is clear paid will only be 90,000. So the gross amount is only 90,000, and so the net amount is 100 divided by 119 out of this, so only 75,630 and 25 cents. So it does not matter what or how a price is presented as 1 million minus a 90% discount, or if you directly say 100,000, or if you say, as you do it here, price is officially 100,000, but you get 10% off, then it's clear that only 90,000 are the price. So all the psychology doesn't matter. The law asks for what is really paid. Discounts, rebate, bonuses lower the price. Sometimes a discount is granted under a condition, for example, under the condition that payment happens quickly. Let's look to that. A wholesaler sells a good to a retailer for an official price of 100,000, but if the price is paid quickly and the wholesaler receives the money within 7 days after delivery, they can agree upon that, then the retailer has only the right to reduce the price by 2% and has only to pay 98,000. So the retailer really transfers the money so quickly, pays quickly, and therefore only pays and has to pay 98,000. In that case, ask the law again. The gross amount is all what the customer pays, and what the customer pays is 98,000. Originally 100,000 had been agreed, but in the end what the customer pays is 98,000. So 98,000 is the gross amount, because again, all the rest is only psychology, or does not turn into reality. What is really paid is 98,000, so the net amount is 82,352, because again, gross amount divided by 119%, so that's what you get here. By the way, here you can observe some interesting phenomenon. First, the official price is 100,000 and later it is changed. So if you have to make a tax declaration, let's say on the second day after the sale, then first the official price is still 100,000. So you would have to declare first that your gross price for which you sold is 100,000 only a few days later, when the payment of the customer comes in within that 7 days. Then the contract conditions are changed and the price then drops down to 98,000 gross price. That plays no role. That just shows you that a price can change in the course of time. That will be the second subchapter of the tax-based chapter here. But in principle, in the long run, it is clear what the customer pays. So what is definitively at the end the right tax base is 98,000 gross price, so 82,352. Now, it might also happen that people pay more than they have to. Imagine a married couple goes and they celebrate their 25th anniversary of their marriage together with friends in a restaurant. It's a great event. They also engage an opera singer to entertain them and their guests with some music, and the agreed wage for the singer is 500 euro. Okay, probably you don't get an opera singer for that, but depending on how hard up the opera singer is at the moment, it might work. Now, after the evening, the couple is really thankful to the singer's efforts. Oh, you were so great, and here, your money, and please don't be offended. We were so fascinated and so moved by how you entertained us. Here's 700 instead of the agreed 500. Now, consequences under VAT. The definition of the tax base is clear and leaves no doubt. The tax base is all what the entrepreneur gets and not what he or she has to get under the contract. So the gross amount is what he gets for the service rendered, so singing, and so what he really gets is 700, not 500. So everything is perfectly clear. 700 is a gross amount, and so we use that to calculate the net amount, plain and simple. On the other hand, it might happen that, for example, in a restaurant, you give a tip to an employee. For example, again, our married couple, after the end of their evening in the restaurant, they are thankful to the waiters and they tip the waiters with an additional 100 euro. So restaurant owner's bill is 1200, but they give a tip of 100 to the waiters. Consequence. The consideration is all what the enterprise owner gets, minus the VAT included therein, and now we see restaurant owner gets 1200 and the tip never goes to the restaurant owner. The tip goes to the waiters from the beginning onwards. So the entrepreneur never has a right to that 100 euro, so all the entrepreneur gets is 1200 only. The waiters get 100 for their good service. And so we could ask if that the waiters are paid for their service is an additional taxable transaction, so tax test 1.1 number 1, and the clear answer here is yes, the waiters did something for the married couple, but the waiters did that as employees, and so being not independently active does not allow taxability, because Only what an entrepreneur does can be taxable. So these 100 euro paid to the waiters are indeed not taxable, not part of the tax base for the restaurant owner, and no taxation in the hands of the waiters, because the waiters are not entrepreneurs. What if you give a tip to the owner of a shop? Well, you go to the haircutter's shop and you have to pay 18 euro there for a haircut. And now you have a fit of generosity, or some might say just of decency, and so you pay 20 euro instead. Now the person who served you was the owner of the haircutter's shop. What's the consequence for VAT? All what the entrepreneur got for the service is the consideration, the gross amount. Now the owner here claimed 18 euro but got 20, and what counts is not what you claimed but what you got. And so 20 euro is all the owner got. The reason why you got the 2 euro on top is that you rendered, that you gave a very good service. So the 2 euro on top are also paid for the service. So gross amount is clearly 20 euro, not 18. So further consequence, you have to register the additional 2 euro in the cash register, or write them down, or have them in your bookkeeping. At least if you hide them, that would be a case of tax fraud with regard to the value-added tax, which is due on that additional 2 euro. By the way, if you ever observed that in small and medium firms of that kind, the owner refuses to take a tip, says, well, you don't need to give me a tip, please don't be offended by it. An owner doesn't need a tip, I already have my profit, but I would be happy probably, or my employees would be happy, if you were willing to give the tip to the employees which served you in the beginning until I took over, then I gladly accept this as a tip to my employees and pass it on to them. Then sometimes if you find or meet these people and you have the idea, oh, generous people, very noble attitude, they don't take tips for themselves, they pass it on to the employees, how nice. And the answer is that simplifies life greatly for them, because they don't have to correct their cash register and their whole accounting if they just always refuse to take a tip. Then it's clear the amount typed in the cash register is indeed identical with the amount which is the VAT gross consideration. Now the clever ones among you will probably say, okay, then in practice the owners will all say they never accept a tip, and just tell this to the fiscal office and keep the tip for themselves. And there is the answer. There is a very easy way to find that out, because the fiscal office just need to send one for a haircut there to be served by the owner, and then if that person tries to give the owner a tip, the owner accepts it, then it's clearly proven that the owner accepted tips. And then if the accounting doesn't show the additional tips for the owner, then the fiscal office can prove that the accounting is not done properly and can estimate what the owner additionally obtained by tips. And you can rely on one thing: whenever the fiscal administration is allowed to estimate something, they estimate generously. So in that case, you will regret that nice idea. Okay, so you see here, it's a great difference if you give a tip to an employee or to the owner of a shop. Well, it also happens from time to time if one is organized in a sufficiently chaotic way, that is, that a customer pays the same invoice twice. Imagine how that could happen. Mr. Traveler, for example, is a business person and is often in business travels. on one of his trips, he buys something on credit card for 200 euro, but says, my accounting department always wants to have an official invoice. So please could you send me that to my home address by mail? Classic mail, for example. Good. Because he wants to be able to deduct the input VAT, or he wants to have a document in case that something is wrong with the product and you have to invoke the warranty. Okay, so the vendor does this and sends the invoice home. Now, Mr. Traveler does not do his bookkeeping himself, but there is an employee or an outsider busy on that. And so the person having that invoice in his or her hands does not know that this invoice has already been paid by credit card, and so transfers the 200 euro again in the name of the vendor from the vendor's account. So erroneously, the same invoice has been paid twice. By the way, if you hear that story, you can probably understand why very often if you pay by credit card, experienced shop people staple that small copy of the credit card. It's not a voucher, but the credit card piece of paper to the invoice which they hand over to you, so that your accountant can directly see that the amount has already been cleared by credit card payment, and that they have the necessary information to follow that correctly through the books, to avoid such tragedies like this one here. The consequences of our complete catastrophe, which I told you here, is the tax base is everything which the entrepreneur has got, and not everything which the entrepreneur should have got. So in both cases, the customer wanted to pay for the service or the good which was delivered. And so our customer paid 400 euro gross price for the product in total, although he didn't want to do so. So as long as the money is not given back, the second payment is not given back by the shopkeeper, perhaps the shopkeeper is also organized in a complete chaos and so can't find out to whom he has to give back that additional payment. As long as the money is not given back, the gross amount definitively is 400 euro, in spite of only 200 have been agreed upon. You would say this could never happen in a well-organized firm, but you will find out in practice not everybody is well organized. For example, if you look, there were some typing mistakes on my last slides already, so you see even I talking about this am very far away from being well organized, and in everyday life outside there, absolutely the same thing happens everywhere. So it might happen from time to time, and if, let's say, out of 5,000 events it happened one time, then this is still a frequent event which happens. Another example: which influence can errors have on the gross amount? For example, people might make an error concerning the tax rate. Imagine a trader sells chocolate to a retailer. They agree on a net price plus VAT. They say, okay, this shipment of chocolate will cost 3,000 net. So the trader charges the retailer with an amount of net price 3,000, adds the VAT on top of this 19% erroneously. Perhaps the trader is somebody from outside Germany or so, I don't know, but it happens. Or an intern writes the invoice, one never knows. So in the end, the gross price charge is 3,570. Now the customer indeed pays this amount by bank transfer because the customer is also a bit confused, doesn't have the time to check the invoice, and makes basic mistakes. That should never happen, but with 80 million people in the population, you can guarantee that such strange things will happen from time to time. So two idiots deal with each other, and now, unfortunately, the VAT rate for chocolate is 7% only, so that the price should have been only 3,210. What is the net amount? And the answer is, look to the legal formula. The tax base is all what the entrepreneur gets minus the VAT, which is included. All what the entrepreneur gets here is definitively not what the contracting parties think they should be getting. And the VAT included is definitively not what the people think to be the VAT, but the VAT. So the VAT under the law, the correct one. And so the correct calculation now will be everything which is paid 3,570 is the gross price. Now the correct VAT is 7% out of that, so 7 out of 107, this is 233.55, and so that leaves us with a net amount of 3,336.45. So the VAT included in the price is always the correct one. By the way, as our seller made the mistake to overcharge VAT and to show a higher amount of VAT on the invoice, I hope that you remember that everybody who confirms VAT in an invoice has at least to pay that amount confirmed in the invoice, even if that is under the rules not really owed to the fiscal authorities. Just because you issued that wrong invoice, you have to also pay to the fiscal office the overcharged VAT amount, whereas on the other side, the customer can only claim input tax refund for the legally correct VAT amount. So here in the chaos which our people created, the entrepreneur has to pay the full 570 shown on the invoice to the fiscal office, whereas the recipient of that invoice can only deduct the correct 7% out of the invoice, so 233.55. Let's look to another example, ladies and gentlemen. Now we have here example 8. What do we have if we have influence of errors concerning the tax rate? Imagine a similar situation like before, but now just the other way around. A taxi driver gets an order to drive a customer from Kleve to the airport of Munich. Now the driver has heard that driving a taxi has a rate of 7%, but surprise, and what the driver has forgotten is that the 7% rate is only applicable for public transport within the same municipality or over a distance of not more than 50 kilometers. So driving a taxi from Kleve to Munich airport is definitively a bit too far away, and so the 7% rate says, well, I'm out, and the 19% rate comes back. The customer and the taxi driver shall have agreed on a net price of the 1,000 as a flat rate for the transport. 7% come on top under the law 770. That is at least what the driver thinks. He charges the customer with 1070. Now, in reality, it should have been 19%. So consequences are, all what the customer really paid is definitively 1070 here, not more. Now this is according to the legal rules 119% of our unknown net price. Because it does not matter what the third parties thought to be the net price, it only matters what the law says, what the net price is. So gross price divided by 119% is net price here, 899.15. The VAT amount on that would be 170.85. And so the taxi driver has to pay the full 19% out of the gross price, naturally, because you can't just say I want to pay less because I made an error in my calculation. On the other hand, the customer, if it's a business customer, and that's highly plausible in that situation here, the customer can only deduct that amount of VAT which has been confirmed in the invoice. So the customer can only deduct the 70 euro which have been shown in the invoice. Probably if one of the two realizes the mistake and they still have the possibility to communicate with each other, if they know each other, then they might enter into contact again and correct the whole mess by calculating the thing anew, or issuing a correct invoice, or what else ever. But as long as the situation stands as it does here, we have a VAT of 170.85, 19% out of 1070, and the customer only being able to deduct the 70 which are shown in the invoice. Now, a frequent problem might also be that you get a payment, a counter performance, or what else, something in return, which is not money, but something which has a monetary value. So you are not paid in cash, but you get something else, non-monetary considerations. In that case, the rules are plain and simple. You just have to do as if you had not got that non-monetary consideration, but as if you had got a payment amounting to the market value of what you got. So imagine a lawyer does a job for a car trader, divorce or setting up a partnership contract or what else. The car trader then pays by giving a new car for free to the lawyer. And the new car has a market value of 20,000. So we have to do as if the lawyer had got a payment of 20,000 in cash instead, and had then immediately afterwards bought the car for that cash. Because that can make no difference in no tax system of the world. That should be everywhere, because otherwise the system would break down if you treat barter trade differently from exchanging cash. So the 20,000 is the gross payment. The lawyer's services are charged with 19% VAT, so the 20,000 have to be regarded as 190% of the unknown net amount which we are looking for. The net amount shall then be 16,806.72, and the remaining difference is value-added tax. So our lawyer, who gets a car in return for his services, has to pay a VAT amount of approximately 3,100 and some euros for having rendered that service. Now you will probably ask yourselves, where does he take the money from? And the answer is, we do not know, because here what economically happens is the lawyer gets paid 20,000 in cash, and the seconds later gives away the whole 20,000 to buy a new car. And then it's clear that there will be some money missing. If all the money which you get is directly spent by you, and you don't lay aside a bit of the money which you get for your tax liabilities, then you always will end up in financial problems. So that's not a peculiarity of barter trade only here. In general, barter transactions are always to be treated in the same way. you always have to do, if you get something in return which is not money, you have to replace that by its market value and have to do as if you had not got that thing but the market value in cash. So again, an example, it's now example 10, barter trade. A lawyer, I don't know why I like lawyers today, lawyer does work for the owner of a bookshop. And now the lawyer's work would have a value of 2,000 euro, but as the owner of the bookshop is not very liquid, fluid, does not have very cash at the moment, he allows the lawyer to select books with a market value of up to 2,000 euro in total from his shop. So payment in kind, not in money. The lawyer says, yes, okay, why not? Treatment under value-added tax. First, here we have two entrepreneurs and each of them do something. So we have the lawyer who gives a service within his enterprise for consideration, let's say in the inland, so it's taxable service. Lawyers' services are taxed under 19%, so we have to think about that. All what our lawyer gets for the service is a gross amount of 2,000 in form of books. So the 2,000 have to be treated as if they had been paid in cash. And if our lawyer gets 2,000 for his services in return, then 100 out of 119 of that amount is net amount and the rest is VAT. So our lawyer knows that for his services, 319.33 euro are due to be paid to the fiscal office, and he has to give the bookshop owner an invoice confirming these amounts. Now, the bookshop owner gave away books to the lawyer. Selling books is the core business of a bookshop owner, so no surprise this will be taxable for the bookshop owner. Now, what he got in return was services of the lawyer, which evidently had a market value of 2,000. So we have to do as if our bookshop owner had received a cash amount of 2,000 and had immediately spent, a second later spent the money on paying the lawyer. There should be no difference. So what our bookshop owner got in return for selling the books was a value of 2,000 gross. Now, 2,000 gross amount for books is 107% of the unknown net amount for the books, because the tax rate for books in Germany is only 7%. So 2,000 is what the bookshop owner got. Do as if he or she got that only in cash. Then you deduct 7% out of them, and so you end up with a net amount of 1,869, and 7% on top of that is 130.84 euro. So here you see that principle that what you got in return has always to be transformed into cash values according to its market value. That makes barter trade cases really easy. The difference, by the way, in the two cases is explained by the fact that what the one person delivers is taxed only at 7%, and what the other person renders as service is taxed under 19%. And everybody pays the rate which is the appropriate one for the thing which he or she does. Yeah, payment in installments is also interesting. We have already mentioned that in a previous example shortly, but we should repeat it. A car trader from Kleve in Germany sells a car to a customer. The price has to be paid in 20 installments of 1,100 euro each per month. So all what the customer pays is not 1,100 euro each month. All what the customer pays at the moment when the car is handed over, then the consideration is all what the customer pays, and all what the customer pays has no time limit. So you have to find out all what the customer pays on which time ever till the end of eternity and have to declare that. Now you can only find that out by looking into the contract. The reasonable assumption is we have agreed on 20 installments of 1100 euro. So probably customer will pay 20 installments of 1100 euro. So we have a reasonable estimate. 22,000 euro will be the gross amount. The VAT included is 19%. So gross amount is 119% of the unknown net amount. So we end up with a net amount of 18,487.39. The important thing which you need to know here is the VAT formula does not ask to when the consideration is paid. All what the customer pays means all what the customer ever is paying or is going to pay. Now let's modify that example a bit as before, but now the modification is that as after 5 months the buyer dies in a car accident. Now unfortunately in exactly the car which we have delivered him. The car gets completely destroyed. The car trader does not get any further installments paid. There is no insurance which covers the damage, and for reasons of public reputation, the car trader regards it as not recommendable to knock on the door of the widow and the 5 hungry children to insist in a payment of the remaining installments. Or the buyer has left no heirs, so there is even nobody where you could knock on the door. So you lose all the remaining installments to which you would have had a claim. The result is now all what the customer pays is different from what you originally expected. You expected a gross amount of 22,000 and calculated the VAT amount which was due to the fiscal office based on that assumption. But now in the retrospective, so afterwards, your knowledge about all what the customer pays has dramatically changed. You know the 22,000 was a wrong estimate now, and you only got 5,500 and you never will get any more. So a correction of the originally wrong amounts and wrong VAT amount should be made. For this you have special rules in the German VAT law under which circumstances and at which moment such a correction is possible. That is paragraph 17 USDG. That is going to be dealt with a bit later. But the important thing is the legal formula has again to be followed. All what the customer pays is the relevant basis for the tax-based calculation. And now if that changes, there will also be a change allowed or necessary even. Another aspect in the tax formula, the gross amount is described as everything which the supplier gets from the customer or from a third party. Why are payments which somebody receives, a trader or so, from a third party, also a part of the tax base of the gross amount? And in order to explain that, let's just imagine something which nearly in a similar way happened in my childhood. So little Norbert, 6 years old, goes into a flower shop and wants to buy flowers for his mother because Mother's Day is going to happen soon. Now little Norbert has only a small amount of pocket money and asks the owner of the shop how many flowers and which I can get for €2. Now the shop owner is a very polite woman and asks him which flowers he would wish to acquire. Now he points to some red and yellow ones, says these ones would be nice. Now unfortunately, as you know from nowadays also, the price of flowers is far away from whatever could be affordable with €2. Now in the back where Norbert doesn't see him, his father, for pedagogical reasons, wants to have Norbert's offer success. And so he signalizes the shop owner and shows the wallet and signalizes, I am going to pay the rest. So proudly Norbert pays €2 for an enormous bouquet of flowers, and father, acting tactfully backstage, pays the remaining additional amount of horrendous €38 for the remaining price to make the deal working. Officially now, the price agreed between Norbert and the shop owner was only €2. And I was the customer, so what the shop owner got from me was only €2. But only the willingness of a third party to give €38 on top made the contract possible. Otherwise, the contract would have been refused. So all what the shop owner got was €40. That was the real price. You should include that into the tax base if you are a legislator who is wise, because imagine the law would say, we don't include that into the price. Only what Norbert paid is taxable. Then what would clever people do? Or what would clever shop owners require even their customers to do? Imagine father and Norbert again go to the shop. Father wants to buy flowers for mother. €40. Shop owner says, yeah, principal, €40 must be, but don't be angry. Little Norbert is going to buy this flowers for €2. You give me the remaining 38. Father is a bit irritated. And the answer is, I do this for tax reasons, because if Norbert makes a contract and buys them for 2, then I can completely keep your remaining 38 without paying VAT. Would people do this? Split up the price? Would people show up always in pairs of 2 in a shop and say, I'm interested in this new TV set, I offer you €1 for it, and the second one says, and the remaining 5,999 will be paid by me? This would be an idiot-proof, a foolproof model of saving taxes. So that you can't do this mistake. You can't make such a fundamental mistake if you write the rule for a tax base. It could be so easily avoided, so you must say everything counts as consideration which either the customer gives or what the third party gives on top in order to make that contract possible. So here we have a gross amount of €2 paid by Norbert, 38 given by father on top to make the affair possible. €40 is the gross amount and flowers are 7%, so the net amount was €37.38. Payments made by third parties not very often happen in the way which I described just now. It probably is due to, must have been a nice child of a good customer in my childhood, that a thing like that could happen. But where such things happen more often is with cities subsidizing public transport made by private companies. Imagine the city of Cologne in Germany wants to secure a functioning public transport system in the city for affordable prices for the citizens. So, but they don't want to set up an own bus company, so they ask a local bus company under which conditions, for which gross payment, they would be willing to guarantee a local transport system for affordable prices with sufficient frequency and so on. And they agree that if they make a payment of 1 million to the bus company agrees to organize public transport in a certain frequency on certain lines for prices of not more than, let's say, 1.50 euro per for a short distance or so for affordable prices. Under these circumstances, the gross amount paid for the transport of passengers within the city is as follows. Let's imagine that the tickets bought by the bus passengers is 500,000 tickets times 2 euro. Then we have 1 million paid by the passengers. 1 million has been paid on top by the city, so the gross amount paid for all the transports in the city is 2 million gross. Now 7% public transport within a city, so 7% out of 107 is to be deducted as VAT, so the net amount would be 1,869,158 euro. Huh? And last but not least, please remember this. We have main elements of an event or a transaction and ancillary elements. And I told you when we were discussing the preparatory steps that ancillary elements can be ignored completely. They vanish. They do not exist. And everything which you pay, under which pretext at all you pay it, is always paid for the main element of your transaction. Now, a very frequent situation is that a customer in the supermarket pays 1 euro for a bottle of a certain soft drink, plus a deposit of 25 cents for the bottle. Now, under the VAT perspective, it's clear that the sale of the bottle and of the drink cannot be separated. It's really impossible from the view of an average consumer that you go to Aldi and say, I want to buy this Coke here, but not in your bottle, but in the bottle of Lidl. That's impossible, so it's a uniform transaction, and the whole transaction has to be assessed as one single event. Only one thing happens, and ancillary elements have to be crossed out and eliminated, to be ignored completely. Now it's clear that you are interested in the drink and not in the bottle. So the bottle is only an ancillary element. You can see that you either throw it away or give it back afterwards. So everything which you pay is paid for the drink, the main element. So the full 1.25 euro are paid only for the soft drink. So that's the gross amount for your soft drink. Now later, when the bottle is returned, you get 25 cents back. So then all what you paid goes down later. So we have a change in the payment, which happens after the events. And so all what the customer paid now goes down from 1.25 euro to 1 euro only. So the original VAT treatment has to be corrected. And how that has to be done and when it has to be done is regulated by paragraph 17 of the German law. But the decisive thing is, first, the deposit is a part of the transaction remuneration. And only if you hand the bottle back, then the seller can correct the gross amount downwards. If not, so if you keep the bottle and never bring it back, and so that the 25 cents can be kept, then the 25 cents are taxable and not as a consideration, not as a sales price for a bottle, but for the drink. Now you might ask, but what if the bottle is thrown away by the customer and somebody else brings it back? Then the trader would have to hand back 25 cents to somebody else than a customer. And probably one could see that in the system of the law as a negative payment by a third person. You know, we have talked just now about the fact that the gross payment made by the customer plus the gross payment made by others add up to the total consideration. And in that case, which I described just now, a beggar or so brings back the bottle and collects the 25 cents. You could say you have a gross payment made by the customer of €1.25 minus a gross payment of minus 20 cents given to the beggar, to a third person, and that adds up to the total remuneration of €1 for the soft drink in the end. Okay. Now these were very, very many examples, so I think it's time for a break, and we are going to think about some other aspects later. See you back soon again, and recover well.